Hello and welcome to the Odyssey, navigating the early career clinician researcher waters. Join us as we delve into the journeys of two poor souls paving their way in medicine and research. Welcome to the Odyssey. Actually, Sanjay, I think we're four souls today, aren't we not?
Yeah, it's very exciting to have two guests in our talk, and they bring data, Simon. They bring data. So they have presented. They've got a paper out, a preprint and soon to be published paper, looking at data on how much clinician scientists and clinician educators get paid in the US. Very recent data, and they have factors and analysis on what predicts good startups and not good startups. So very exciting to introduce Dr. Kathy Gao and Dr. Emily Olson. Do you mind introducing yourselves first and what you're doing and where you're based, please?
So I'm Emily Olson. I am a recently graduated pulmonary critical care fellow. I worked with Kathy at Northwestern University and just started on staff as a senior associate consultant is my formal title at Mayo Clinic, where I do both critical care and primarily airway disease as my outpatient practice.
And I'm Kathy Gao. I'm an assistant professor at Northwestern, also in pulmonary and critical care. I primarily focus on machine learning on ICU data. So super excited to be here. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. I think I'll start, Simon, the first question.
Absolutely.
So quick plug to Dr. Catherine Gao's and Dr. Emily Olson's paper, first senior author and first filters. You can look it up. I'll read out the full title in a second. But what they looked at was the different types of first academic medical job offers in pulmonary critical care medicine and the variability and different things, startups, negotiations, what factors, early support, late support, time. So yeah, what got you into this? Before we go into the details, what made you talk about this or write about this, analyze this?
Yeah, so this was really inspired, I think, by our academic job negotiation experience and those of our colleagues around us. When I went through the job search looking for, again, a physician scientist role, I tried to find information and really there was just a paucity of details out there for, what's a reasonable startup package? What's the breakdown? What are things that you can negotiate or not? And I talked to, basically everyone I could, and there was just a ton of variability and all these small things that, I never even knew to ask about. And so Emily and I really wanted to try and compile information to maybe help the people going through the process in the future and just describe how widely variable it seems to be.
So I really like this study, and because I think I relate to what made you start the study, because we all had the same issue when we started up. We didn't know what to do, and that's the basis for the podcast. So really excited to have you, and maybe I can pivot to Emily. So how about you, Emily? Because you're the most recent appointee among us. When you were early in training, what did you personally assume an academic job offer would look like, and how did that compare with reality?
Excellent question. So I think I was pretty naive early on in training where I thought you were either a physician scientist or you did clinical work, maybe with some research or some education aspect. And I thought it was pretty standardized across where you had a breakdown of clinical time and then you got some extra time. And in hindsight, it is so variable even among clinician educators where RVUs mean different things, breakdown of time, how your time gets paid for is really highly individualized, not only within the institution, but across institutions. And it's hard to navigate that not only as a trainee sort of going into it, but even now, 6 months into my career, just trying to get the details of what those breakdowns are is so variable and it makes it challenging to have conversations about it too.
It's a really murky area, isn't it? Sanjay and I were discussing this, yeah.
Yeah, no, everyone comes up and we learn from others' mistakes. So this is great that the data is out there. So Kathy, from a mentor's perspective, how often do you see trainees come to you unprepared for what job negotiations actually involve?
Oh, so often. I think in the beginning, trainees are just so excited they got an offer.
Yeah,
and
true.
they're like, happy with what they have. And especially for physician scientists, they might not know details to even ask about startup package or, how protected time or lab space is guaranteed and, how sort of this FTE cutoff actually translates into day-to-day work. And I think this just reflects how little formal training we're provided about, what to talk about, how to negotiate, and also somewhat a little bit about like the topic being a little taboo, being like, oh, we shouldn't pry too much into these details. But I really think the information is empowering and helpful. I think the more open we are about it, the more we discuss it, the better prepared our trainees will be as they go forth into their own job negotiations.
It is absolutely taboo. I agree. It's like this thing you do not mention, or you're even embarrassed about mentioning your own startup to a colleague. You don't want to create any asymmetry, and it is taboo.
Yeah,
and it shouldn't.
you
It
almost
should
feel
not
like you're
be.
boasting, right? It feels like you're boasting, or
Yeah.
or you feel like a chip on your shoulder because you didn't get as much as the other person. No, I strongly agree with you, Kathy and Emily. We need this out there. So thank you for doing the work.
So let's break the taboo together. So Emily, you have the toughest question today, which will be to summarize your paper for the readers who obviously are too busy to maybe read it. But let's pretend the audience will not read the paper, sadly, which I discourage. I will put the link in the description. But how about you run us through the paper in less than 3 hours, please?
Excellent. So we sent out an electronic survey to U.S.-based pulmonary and critical care physicians who had graduated fellowship between 2020 and 2025 and accepted academic jobs. And that survey really tried to detail out their job offers, including salaries, startup packages, clinical and non-clinical FTE or full-time equivalent, meaning what is their clinical breakdown versus their research versus their education time, and then negotiation experiences. And to get to the meat of it, we found that there was a lot of variability. So 60 respondents answered our survey questions and ultimately provided information about 103 job offers. And we were able to compare those across job types of physician scientists versus clinician educators, as well as dive into the data itself. So I think both Kathy and I were not surprised to see that physician scientists received lower salary offers compared to clinician educators. But the things that were really helpful to understand was that physician scientists who received a career development award prior to negotiating that job offer did end up having an association with a higher startup package.
Is that K23? Sorry for interrupting.
Yes. So, okay. And Kathy can correct me too. We kept career development offer a very vague description, and so K23 would be one of them. And I think like the other part then for clinician educators who are listening to this, we did find that the amount of FTE or full-time equivalent time that was non-clinical was widely variable. And actually the majority of our clinician educators didn't have non-clinical FTE offered to them in that first offer. And I think that's a scary part of how do you get academic work done if you don't have time to do it. And I think the other telling part really came out in our qualitative or free text responses, where a lot of individuals commented on the lack of negotiation power, especially if they wanted to stay at their home institution. And I think that brings up a really challenging conversation for trainees is how do you negotiate knowing you want to stay at a certain place?
Thanks for the rundown.
Yeah, that's a really striking data, and it's scary. Like you say, how can you get anything done if you don't have the time to get it done? You spoke a lot about the variability. What was the most surprising degree of variability? What was the thing, both of you really, what struck you as the most surprising thing compared to what you set up?
I think, we both expected to see some degree of salary variability, especially depending on, cost of living, location, place like that, things like that. But what surprised me is all these sort of small hidden things in variability that sometimes I think people didn't even know to ask about. So an example specifically that I encountered was this idea of cost sharing, which in the physician scientist pathway is where you don't do that much clinical time. And so you might not even be able to do enough ICU, revenue to sort of pay for your salary to be at a reasonable level for a physician graduate. And so some institutions have this policy that's called cost sharing, where you actually have to use your own startup package to pay your own salary.
Oh dear.
It's usually for the first couple of years, and that can be a substantial amount of money in the hundreds of thousands. And so I think unless you really read the fine prints, you might not realize that your startup package might actually be, half of what you think it is. And so things like that, where places don't have that or do have that, to me was just wild how different that could be.
Yeah, in Canada, we have this expression, you eat what you kill also. So some physician scientist positions are, and we don't kill anyone as physician scientists. I just want to just say this. So
maybe Simon. But yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. But you eat, you get what you bill. So if you don't do activities clinically, then you don't get paid for your non-academic time. So that is worrisome. And I had a question on maybe some interesting findings on the people that had multiple offers. Those people in your study were associated with higher salaries. So I had a very just simple question on confounding. Is that maybe that the more attractive trainees get more offers? Or is it that some trainees, and I'm going to say right off the bat, I've been advising my mentees to go out and get many offers or many negotiations up and running to get more leverage. So I'm wondering if are those successful negotiators or successful scientists?
Oh, this is, I think, the crux of this study is we don't know. I do think that there's something to be said about being able to negotiate having another offer in hand, at least from the clinician educator standpoint. That was helpful more for negotiation of time. I actually interviewed at several institutions where they have what they call salary equity. So it doesn't matter who you are coming in the door, and you're able to negotiate the fine print. I know that's a very different path than most physician scientists, but I do think that there's something to be said about being able to negotiate having something else as a job offer.
I mean, Sanjay, maybe you can just remind us of your experience you had when you got two offers, then things became more sweeter, right?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. People always, you need to entice the organization. Everyone wants to underpay you, I guess. And I think that segues to the next point. Some people have to stay internal for family reasons, different reasons. How is there nothing they can do to strengthen their hand? Are they always going to be dealt the worst hand because they chose to stay internal, or hoping to stay where they trained and where they live?
Yeah, no, I think this is such a good question. I think it's really challenging because internal candidates sort of often face the department or division's implicit assumption that they're valuing continuity and location over other factors. So the institution might sort of interpret that as a reduced willingness to walk away and such, therefore, reduced leverage. And several of our respondents in their, free text really sort of capture this. And one quote I'll just read is, "I was told that the trade-off of staying where you did fellowship was that you didn't have to move, but you had no leverage for a startup. I got a computer and a desk as a startup." And that was it. So that quote, I was like, ooh, that's like a gut punch there. I do think that you should still have some degree of leverage, even if you want to stay internal. And that's, again, one of the things we're hoping by sharing all these numbers, you can at least point to, hey, even if I myself didn't go out and get a counter offer, this is what sort of my colleagues in similar roles are receiving. And so wouldn't it be maybe a little bit more equitable to try and, sweeten the deal a little bit?
Get a bit closer to that.
As you said. Yeah. Right. So hopefully those are things that could be helpful. But I do agree. I think a counter offer is always in your favor to sort of strengthen your negotiating position.
And that specific problem where we have the impression that we can't negotiate, and we just need to say thank you when we're served a keyboard and a screen and a computer. Do you think that's an institutional problem, cultural problem, a training problem, or all of the above? I guess all of the above is the easy answer, but if you had one to blame, do you think it's culture, institutions, or training the issue?
Oh, I wish I could say all three because institutionally there is no flexibility for negotiation just based on policies, whether that be good or bad. But I think it comes down to the culture of academic medicine, at least here in the U.S., is we've gone through our training with really cookie cutter, I guess, payment structures, and you can't really argue how much time you're doing in training. And all of a sudden, we're sort of thrown into the world, and we have to be grateful for the job that we're being offered. And I think there's still this cultural underlying and narrative that we have to be negotiation might be inappropriate, even though we are encouraged to negotiate to get that sweeter deal. And it's a really big challenge for educators in particular of how do we rework that narrative of it's okay to negotiate, but also how do we train people to negotiate for what they think is best for their work?
Which is the basis for this work. So we're glad you published this paper, and I hear, Emily, you're working to train fellows to do better. So that's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, important work. Thank you. Just going back to your own, Emily is more recent and Kathy a bit further back. Looking back at early offers, is there something you wish you had pushed back on? You didn't know you could, or you didn't even know that was something you had to do, or you had to ask? Is there something you can tell our listeners that you wish you'd done differently?
Yeah, great. I got lucky in terms of settling on several interviews and several comparing offers. But one thing I didn't expect was just how easy it would be to spend into my startup package and what limitations there might be around that, which was something I didn't really consider. I was like, oh yeah, it should just be like easy, but it ended up being sort of more complicated than that. And that's something I might encourage trainees to deal more with, be like, how exactly are my startup funds limited? And sort of, is there a specific spaced out budget that I need to adhere to? Again, something that, I didn't really know to ask about. And I wish I had clarified that further. Yeah, Emily, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I got a lot of advice from mentors that helped me understand how to ask for full-time equivalent or clinical time. But I wish I would have known how to be more specific with what that actually entailed. And so roles change with time. It's hard to be specific during that negotiation if you don't entirely know what's available at an institution. And so sort of in hindsight, I wish I would have started asking what FTE for clinician educators look like, 3-5 years down the career, and how I could get involved early as part of my time and resource and mentorship team evolved during even the negotiation process.
Kind of great point, asking around with others there, right? Having an opportunity to talk to others there quietly before you even ask the questions.
Yeah, so I think, we all talked about it, and maybe it's not worth asking a specific question on that, but definitely for our listeners, the full-time equivalent and the time protected off clinical work, I mean, it just evaporates, doesn't it, guys? I mean, the time, bizarrely, the vacations are always counted in the non-clinical time as well. So, I mean, you need to take time for yourself as well. So I'll ask one last question on my side, and then maybe Sanjay one, and then we can conclude with the take-home advice you could give us. So my last question would be about gender differences, because obviously we are glad today to have two female physician scientists / clinical educators. So I don't think you, maybe I got this wrong, but I think you did not observe gender differences in salary in this data set, which might contrast with what we know. How would you suggest we interpret your findings?
Oh, excellent. I'm really reassured by this data that we found, but it's not definitive. We have a very small sample size, and salary is only one component of equity. I do think, with my own experience, I learned that a lot of institutions are working towards equitable salaries and making sure that time really doesn't matter what your background is. And so I think we're to this point where we're needing to look at other forms of disparity, whether that be mentorship or leadership and advancement in career. And so going beyond salary and numbers.
Good point. And I guess, also...
I want to be hopeful like you. I think, Emily, I think we are hopefully doing better at this. And but yes, it is a small data set. We shouldn't become complacent. I've got a tough question. What are the 3 things that trainees should absolutely understand before walking into their very first negotiation? Like what do you want them to think about? Talk to themselves. I'm the best. Something like that. What do they need to tell themselves as they're walking into that room? Tell the trainees, tell the listeners.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to boil down just to 3 things, but I think what I would say is, number 1, definitely look at the full package, not the salary, because as we said, sometimes salary might be sort of set, but all these small details and components that go into your full job offer really, really make a huge difference. So really reading the fine print and understanding what that means. I think second, knowing how, FTE, full-time equivalents, and protected time, quote unquote, can translate into different things at different places in terms of your day-to-day work. So just really getting details and understanding what things would actually look like, I think is very important. And third, really, recognize what gives you leverage. I always encourage trainees to seek out multiple interviews and job offers, because I really think not only does that help sort of you understand your sort of self-worth as a doctor, as a scientist, but that always sort of gives you more data, more information, is more power in your hands, and sort of can offer you more insight and also more negotiating power. So hard to boil down to 3 things, but I think that's what I would say.
That's great. And then what about you, Emily?
Oh, I don't know if I can add much more to Kathy, but I think it boils down to that your job offer is not your self-worth, and you have a long career ahead of you. And so if you're able to come up with other offers really to help jumpstart that conversation about not just salary, but what does that time look like, and what is the next few years of your career going to look like, it's going to make a world of difference as you start out.
Great. Well, I'm gonna be the chaperone here and say we're time's up. Let's conclude this. So I will say thank you, and for everyone who wants to read about and eavesdrop, I guess this voyeur, the side of academia, and eavesdrop on other people's packages, please do read Emily Olson, first author, Catherine Gao, last author paper that is, I hear, under review. Going well, yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So I'll be putting the preprint up, but hopefully, I guess the title did not change. Catherine and Emily. Okay, so with the preprint, you can find the title once it's published, and thank you, Sanjay, as well, for co-animating as a teaser for our next episode. I had thought about talking about team and student management, but I've realized it would be interesting to do a deep dive into innovation. Because obviously we as academics develop innovative ideas, and sometimes patents may arise. And for that purpose, we'll get Jeremy Hirota from McMaster, another McMasterian on the show from Canada. So thank you all, and I hope you all have a nice Christmas and Happy New Year, as it is December 2025. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having us.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Bye. Good.